The storm clawed at the desert like a living thing, hurling waves of grit against the metal skin of the old bunker until it screamed in protest. Inside, amber light spilled across rows of tools and half-finished machinery, glinting off the sweat on Ray Mercer's scarred forearms as he tightened the final bolt on the moisture evaporator. The air smelled of oil, metal, and dry heat. The man himself moved with deliberate precision, the kind of discipline that never faded, even after the uniform was gone. 15 years in the frontier wars had left him with enough ghosts to fill the silence, and the silence suited him. Out here on Tiro, the nearest settlement was 50 kilometers away, and that was how he liked it. No officers, no orders, no one to save. Just the wind, the hum of machinery, and the whisper of whiskey as it hit the glass. He took a long sip and stared at the storm gauge, blinking red on the wall. Another one, he muttered, setting the glass down beside the old sidearm he kept out of habit. The wind rose to a roar, shaking the bunker's reinforced doors. He had seen storms strip paint off starships. This one was worse. The sand out there was made of powdered glass, each particle small enough to slice through lungs like razors. No one would be caught outside in it, not if they wanted to live, which was why the sound made him freeze. A faint metallic thump, and again, louder. A knock. Ray frowned and set the glass aside. The wind could make strange noises, but this was too deliberate. He crossed the bunker, boots thudding on metal plating, and checked the external camera. Static. The storm was blinding the feed. Only vague shapes, 3 small figures huddled against the door, their outlines shivering in the wind. He cursed under his breath. Idiots, he muttered, reaching for his rifle. Through the slit of the observation window, the storm blurred the world into amber chaos. But he saw them 2 small forms and 1 larger, bending under the gale. Children. He hesitated only a heartbeat before slamming the lock release. The door opened with a scream of air pressure, and the storm punched inside like a living beast, pelting him with grit. He caught sight of blue skin, white hair, eyes glowing faintly through the sand. The eldest child, no more than 9, clutched the arm of a smaller girl while a frail older woman slumped between them. "Please," the older child gasped in broken standard. "My grandmother. She's sick." Ray grabbed them all and pulled them inside, slamming the door shut. The wind's roar dulled to a muffled moan as he resealed the locks. The children collapsed against the floor, coughing, their pale hair moving as though alive, floating in unseen currents. Aurelians. He hadn't seen one since the peace treaty. Empathic touch telepaths, beautiful and strange, too far from their own territory to be here by accident. He fetched a blanket, water, and his old medkit, kneeling beside the grandmother. Her skin was cold, her breathing shallow and rough. "What were you doing out there?" he asked, voice rough from disuse. The older girl, Fina, she said, spoke softly, careful with every word. "Our camp. Vorax came. We ran." The name made him still. Vorax feral bioweapons from the war, thought to be extinct. He'd seen what they could do. He wrapped the old woman's arm in a thermal bandage and adjusted the heat vents. The little one, Tira, stared wide-eyed at him, unafraid. "You're human," she said with wonder, touching his hand. Her skin was cool and faintly luminous, her mind brushing his like a whisper of warmth. He didn't pull away. "You're safe now," he said. It felt strange, the words heavy on his tongue. He fixed them food ration stew, synthetic but warm, and watched the girls eat while the storm raged outside. Fina ate carefully, always glancing at her grandmother. The old woman, Anine, murmured in her sleep, words that sounded like prayer. Ray turned away, pretending not to listen, but the sound tugged at something buried deep in his chest. When the lights flickered, he checked the power core, resetting the backup. His eyes lingered on the keypad of the old panic room. 7392. His code. His past life sealed behind that door. Old ghosts don't rest easy, he muttered, closing the panel. The storm outside began to fade by degrees, wind giving way to a heavy stillness. He looked back toward the couch where the family slept under borrowed blankets, the small girl curled against her sister, their grandmother's hand resting over both. Something inside him shifted, a warmth he hadn't felt in years, fragile but real. He poured himself another drink, stared at the storm monitor, and told himself he'd send them on their way once it cleared. But as dawn painted the sky a dull orange, the stillness broke again, low and mechanical, the guttural thrum of engines descending through the quiet air. He stepped to the viewport. 3 shadows swept over the dunes, insectoid shapes cutting through the light. Krell scavengers. And they were landing. Ray woke before the sun breached the horizon, though on Tiro that meant little. The world was always half buried in dust. The air recyclers hummed faintly, filling the bunker with its sterile warmth. For a moment, he allowed himself to believe the night's events had been a dream. But then he heard the soft breathing from the couch, saw the 2 girls curled together beneath his old field blanket, their grandmother's frail shape barely moving on the cot nearby. Reality settled in heavy and strange. He was no longer alone. The quiet wasn't his anymore. He poured stale coffee into a dented mug, the bitter scent mingling with the metal tang of morning. The storm had passed, leaving the world outside painted in pale gold and red dust. He should have felt relief, but instead his instincts itched, the kind of warning sense that had saved his life more times than he cared to count. Something was wrong. He set the mug down and crossed to the console, cycling through external feeds. Static cleared just enough to show a disturbance in the dunes, ripples in the sand that moved against the wind. He zoomed in. Shapes, metallic, 6 of them walking in formation. Krell, his gut tightened. Scavengers, opportunists, killers who followed destruction like carrion birds. If they were here, they'd picked up the beacon from the Aurelian escape pod buried somewhere out there. They weren't coming for him. They were coming for the family sleeping under his roof. Ray turned from the monitor, the weight of old reflexes falling into place like armor. He crossed to the wall locker, punched in the old access code, and the hiss of decompression filled the room as it slid open. His combat gear waited inside, matte gray plating scarred from campaigns he'd never speak of again. He strapped it on without hesitation, muscle memory guiding his hands, chest plate first, gauntlets, shoulder seals. The rifle he cleaned once a month out of habit felt perfectly balanced in his grip. The hum of a charged power cell was almost comforting. He'd told himself he was done with this life, but some parts of the soldier never died. "Fina," he said quietly. The older girl stirred awake instantly, protective instinct sharp even through sleep. "What's wrong?" she asked, voice small but steady. "Trouble," he replied. Her sister blinked awake beside her, confusion dawning as she clutched at her grandmother's hand. Ray crouched, his eyes level with the girl's glowing opal gaze. "There's a panic room through that wall," he said, nodding toward the kitchen panel. "Steel and sealant walls, separate air, own-come line. You'll be safe there. What about you?" Fina asked, chin lifting, defiant. He almost smiled at that courage, like that didn't belong in a child. "I'll keep them busy," he said. "You'll lock the door. Code 7392. You open it for no one but me. Understood?" She hesitated, then nodded. Behind her, Annie struggled to sit up, her breath rattling. "You risk your life for strangers," she whispered, voice barely more than air. Ray met her eyes. Because it's what humans do. The good ones, anyway. He moved to the door, sealing his helmet. Through the visor, he watched the horizon shimmer as the Krell approached 7 feet of chitin and metal graphs, multi-armed silhouettes moving with predatory confidence. The lead one carried a plasma spear. The others cradled rifles hacked from scavenged tech. "Stay quiet," he said over his shoulder, and then he hit the door release. The morning wind hit him like a blast furnace. Sand crunched beneath his boots as he took position behind a line of storage crates near the workshop entrance. He didn't have long to wait. The first Krell reached shouting distance and stopped, mandibles twitching as it scanned him. "Human," it rasped in broken standard. "You shelter Aurelians. Surrender them, and you may live." Ray raised his rifle, its targeting reticle locking onto the creature's thorax. "Not gonna happen," he said simply, and squeezed the trigger. The blast ripped through the Krell's chest, spraying yellow ichor across the sand. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then the others screeched and charged. The world narrowed into motion, and sound plasma bolts screaming through the air, metal ringing as debris shattered. Ray moved with the brutal precision of training, ducking between cover, returning fire in short, disciplined bursts. He dropped 2 more before one flank shot hit his shoulder plate, spinning him sideways. Pain flared bright and sharp. He rolled, came up behind a half-melted crate, reloaded. The sonic disruptor sat on his Belta prototype from the war, banned for cruelty. He thumbed the activator and tossed it low across the ground. A pulse of invisible sound erupted, slicing through the Krell ranks. They shrieked, clutching at their headplates. Ray didn't hesitate 3 controlled shots, clean and merciless. The last Krell, massive and armored, charged through the haze, barreling into him with crushing force. The rifle flew from his grip. Its claws locked around his throat, lifting him off his feet. "The females," it hissed, mandibles snapping. "Where?" Ray's hand found the combat knife strapped to his thigh. He jammed it upward into the soft joint, where limb met torso. The alien screamed, stumbling back, ichor pouring down its plated chest. Ray snatched his pulse pistol from the dirt and emptied 3 rounds into its skull. The body collapsed in a hiss of steam and smoke. Silence fell, broken only by his ragged breathing. He stood swaying, adrenaline fading, the faint metallic taste of blood in his mouth. He turned toward the bunker, toward the door where he knew the children waited behind steel and fear. "It's over," he called, voice hoarse. The door slid open slowly, revealing wide, shining eyes. Fina stepped out first, gaze darting to the bodies in the sand. "You're hurt," she said. He looked down at the scorch mark seared into his armor, the blood leaking beneath. "I've had worse." Little Tira ran forward, flinging small arms around his waist. "You saved us," she whispered. He hesitated, then rested a hand gently atop her white hair. "You'll be safe now," he said, though he wasn't sure he believed it. And then he heard it, the distant hum of new engines cutting through the desert air. Sleek, purposeful, nothing like scavenger craft. Fina's expression changed, hope flaring in her luminous eyes. "Mama," she breathed. Ray turned toward the horizon, where a ship of gleaming silver and blue descended through the golden sky. The desert light fractured into gold as the ship descended, scattering the dunes with a ripple of reflected brilliance. Ray squinted through the haze, the outline resolving into something too elegant, too clean to belong to scavengers, a vessel of curved alloy and shimmering pearl, the mark of Aurelian design. Its thrusters slowed with perfect control, sand swirling outward in concentric halos as it landed. The girls bolted forward before he could stop them, their cries of joy cutting through the silence. "Mama!" Tira shouted, her small feet kicking up dust. Fina followed, the guarded stiffness she'd worn since arriving dissolving into raw relief. Ray staggered after them, his body aching from the fight, blood drying in a dark smear across his armor. The ship's ramp extended with hydraulic grace, and a single figure appeared at the top, tall, luminous, her long white hair catching the rising sun. She moved like light-made flesh, the air around her shimmering faintly with bioluminescence. The woman dropped to her knees as the girls ran into her arms, pulling them close, her face buried in their hair. Ray stopped several paces away, unwilling to intrude on something sacred. The sound of the children's laughter felt out of place in the aftermath of violence. He caught movement at the edge of the ramp, an elderly voice calling weakly. "Selene." The woman looked up sharply. Annin had stepped outside, leaning heavily on the doorframe, her frailty softened by the morning light. The younger woman rose, still holding her daughter's hands, and crossed the sand in quick strides. "Mother," she breathed, disbelief and joy mixing in her tone. "We thought you were gone." "And I thought I'd never see you again," Annin whispered, gripping her daughter's arms as if confirming she was real. Ray stood silent, rifle slung across his back, feeling like a ghost among the living. Then Selene's gaze lifted to him. Her eyes, opaline and fathomless, took him in fully. The armor, the burns, the weary posture of a man who'd forgotten how to stand without burden. She straightened, regal despite the sand clinging to her uniform. "Who is this?" she asked, her voice calm, melodic, commanding in a way that reminded him of officers he used to follow, except warmer somehow. Before he could answer, Tira turned, her small face radiant. "He saved us. He fought the bad bugs." Ray rubbed the back of his neck, uncomfortable under the weight of her awe. "They were Krell," he said simply. "Scavengers. They're not coming back." Selene studied him with new intensity, her expression softening as she approached. "You risked your life for my family," she said. "Why?" "Because no one else would," he answered without thinking. She stopped close enough that the faint energy field around her brushed his skin like static. Then she reached out, fingertips grazing his chest plate. Aurelian empathy. The connection hit like a rush of heat images flashing unbidden. War, loss, loneliness, wrapped around mechanical routine. Her eyes widened, her own emotions surfacing through the link, gratitude, sorrow, something deeper that startled him. "Your heart is strong," she murmured. "And kind. It's been too long since I felt that from a human." He took a step back, uneasy with how exposed he suddenly felt. "You can read emotions," he said, trying to sound neutral. "Not thoughts," she corrected gently. "Only echoes. You hide pain well, Ray Mercer." "I didn't give you my name," he said quietly. "You didn't have to." Her voice was like music when she said it. A gust of wind scattered the sand between them, breaking the charged moment. Behind her, the ship's engines pulsed and Annin's knees buckled. Ray lunged forward instinctively, catching her before she fell. Her breathing was shallow, pulse erratic. Selene's composure shattered into alarm. "Mother!" "She's burning up," Ray said. "We need to get her under medical care fast." Selene nodded sharply, slipping back into command. "Help me get her aboard." Inside, the Luminara was a marvel of alien craftsmanship, sleek corridors alive with soft light, air carrying a subtle scent of ozone and flowers. Ray laid Annin on a medical couch as Selene activated a holographic console. The diagnostic lights swept across her mother's body, filling the room with a low hum. "Cellular degradation," Selene muttered, voice trembling beneath the veneer of control. "It's spreading faster than before." "What's wrong with her?" Ray asked. Selene hesitated, eyes flicking toward her daughters, then back to him. "My mother is a scientist, a xenobiologist. She was studying the Vorax genome at our research post. When the hegemony sent them to destroy us, she encoded her findings into her own DNA to keep them from being stolen. Ray frowned. She turned herself into a data vault. Yes, Celine said softly. And the encryption is killing her. For a long moment, neither spoke. Outside, the engines hummed to life, and through the viewport Ray saw the desert shrinking below them as the Luminara rose into the blue haze. "Where are we headed?" he asked. "Nexus Station," Celine replied. "It's the only Aurelian facility with the equipment to extract the data safely." She paused, then added, "And I'm due to report to the High Council about the Vorax attacks." "There are politics involved." Ray leaned back against the bulkhead, studying her profile. In the soft glow of the ship's controls, she looked like something carved from starlight, beautiful and impossibly distant. Yet when she turned toward him, he saw the exhaustion behind her poise. "You don't trust your council," he said. It wasn't a question. "Not all of them," she admitted. "There are those who would rather see this knowledge buried." The ship shuddered suddenly, sensors blaring. Celine's hands flew over the console. "We're being scanned." Ray moved beside her, reading the tactical display. A single vessel approached, fast, sleek, black, and bristling with weapons. "That's not Aurelian," he said. "It's a Krell-modified pursuit craft." "A bounty hunter," Celine said grimly. "They must have tracked the escape beacon." She looked at him, determination hardening her features. "Can you fight?" He almost smiled. "Better than I can hide." She met his gaze, something fierce and unspoken passing between them, then turned back to the controls. The Luminara banked sharply toward the dark horizon as the first plasma shot streaked past their hull. Ray braced himself, feeling the old instincts come alive again. He hadn't realized until this moment how long he'd been waiting for something worth fighting for. The first plasma bolt seared across the viewport, a streak of molten light that lit Celine's face in flashes of red. The Luminara shuddered violently, alarms bleeding into the hum of engines. Ray braced against the console, his boots sliding slightly on the smooth alloy floor as the ship twisted into a defensive roll. "They're closing fast," Celine said, her voice tight but calm. She moved like someone born to this cockpit, hands a blur across the holographic controls, her long hair fanning out behind her with every sharp motion. Ray watched her work, impressed despite the chaos, the steady rhythm of her breathing, the precision of her piloting, the raw instinct hidden behind all that diplomatic grace. The Krell ship followed with brutal persistence, smaller and faster, its silhouette sharp against the scattered stars. "You got weapons on this thing?" Ray shouted over the noise. "Light defensive cannons," Celine answered, gritting her teeth. "Nothing that can match a pursuit class." "Then we don't fight," he said, leaning over her shoulder. "We outthink him." He pointed to the tactical display where a dense asteroid field glowed faintly ahead, the debris from some ancient planetary collision. "Can you get us in there?" "It's suicide," she said, then glanced at him, something daring sparking in her eyes. "But I've flown worse." She angled the Luminara hard and dove toward the rocks. The first asteroids loomed like silent giants, spinning slow and deadly in the void. The Luminara threaded through them with impossible grace, scraping so close that fragments of frozen dust trailed along the hull. Ray strapped into the co-pilot's seat, his fingers moving automatically across auxiliary controls, adjusting shield frequency and forward thrust. The Krell ship fired again, bolts flashing through narrow corridors of stone. "He's good," Ray muttered. "He's persistent," Celine corrected, and then she spun the ship 90 degrees, slipping through a gap barely wider than their wings. The pursuit craft followed but clumsily, scraping its hull against an asteroid's edge. Ray saw his chance. "You said light cannons?" "Right-hand panel," she replied. He activated them, the system responding with a soft thrum under his palms. The targeting reticle blinked red as the Krell swung into view again. He waited, breath steady, timing the moment between its evasive bursts. Now, he whispered and fired. The shot struck the pursuer's maneuvering thruster, sending it spinning out of control into a field of smaller debris. The collision lit up the dark like a miniature sunrise. Not bad for a diplomat's taxi, Ray said, allowing himself the smallest grin. And not bad for a human soldier who forgot how to smile, Celine replied, exhaling slowly. The silence that followed was strange after all that chaos. The asteroids drifted past like slow-moving ghosts, the only sound the soft hum of engines. Celine set the ship on autopilot and turned toward him, her expression no longer all command and calculation. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You saved us again." He shrugged. "We're not clear yet. He'll have friends. You don't believe in rest, do you?" She asked, almost amused. "I did once," he said. "Didn't last." Her gaze lingered on him for a long moment, eyes catching the faint light like polished opal. "You've seen too much," she said softly. "It echoes off you." Before he could respond, a soft chime interrupted the Luminara's communication link. Celine reached out, hesitated, then activated it. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a stern Aurelian face framed by silver-streaked hair and ceremonial markings across the temples. "Cultural Attach Valerian," the voice intoned. "This is Counselor Perrin. You will explain your unsanctioned departure from diplomatic orbit." Celine's posture straightened instantly, every trace of vulnerability vanishing. "High Counselor," she said evenly, "I received a distress signal from my family. The outpost was attacked by Vorax. I've recovered survivors." Perrin's eyes narrowed, gaze shifting to Ray. "And the human?" "He sheltered them during the storm, fought off Krell scavengers. His assistance was invaluable. Humans," Perrin said the word like a stain, "are not cleared for Aurelian diplomatic vessels." Ray folded his arms. "Guess you'll have to make an exception." Perrin ignored him. "Return to Nexus Station immediately. The Council will determine the appropriate course of action." The transmission cut before either could reply. The air between them thickened. Ray leaned back in his chair. "Friendly guy." "Perrin represents the conservative bloc," Celine said bitterly. "They still see your species as volatile, unrefined. That's a nice way to say they hate us." "They fear you," she corrected. "Your emotions, your unpredictability. Our empathy makes us sensitive to it. It overwhelms some Aurelians." "And you?" he asked, his tone quieter. She turned her head slightly, her profile haloed by the console's light. "I don't fear it," she said. "I find it intoxicating." The word hung in the air between them, heavier than the vacuum beyond the hull. She looked away first, tapping a sequence into the console. "We'll reach Nexus in 6 hours." Ray stayed silent, watching the stars slide past, wondering what exactly he'd gotten himself into. By the time they reached the sprawling silver ring of Nexus Station, exhaustion tugged at him, but something else did too, a pull he couldn't name. As the docking clamps sealed with a deep metallic thud, he realized that Tero's silence had been easier than this new kind of noise, the quiet hum of connection, of purpose, of something fragile that felt dangerously close to Hope Dot. The docking clamps groaned as the Luminara locked into place against the vast ring of Nexus Station, the largest Aurelian facility in the sector. Through the viewport, the structure gleamed like a silver halo suspended against the stars, a cathedral of glass and light. Inside, Celine moved with tense precision, her fingers steady on the console, but Ray could feel the weight pressing down on her composure. She was no longer just a mother or a survivor. She was walking back into the lion's den of politics. where truth was a weapon as sharp as any blade. When the airlock cycled open, they were met by 4 Aurelian security officers, their silver uniforms catching the station light. The lead officer, Captain Thurin, bowed stiffly. "Attach Valerian. Counselor Perrin has ordered full quarantine procedures for your return." Seleni's jaw tightened. "My mother requires immediate medical attention." "Medical has been notified," Thurin replied coolly, then turned his focus on Ray. His expression cooled several degrees. "The human will remain under containment until cleared by the Council." Ray met the alien's luminous eyes without flinching. "I'm not going anywhere until I know they're safe." Thurin took a step forward, authority radiating from every precise movement. "That's not your decision." Before the standoff could tip into violence, another voice cut through the tension, measured, feminine, authoritative. "That won't be necessary, Captain." The guards turned as a new figure approached down the corridor, a tall Aurelian woman in white medical robes, her hair braided with silver threads. "Dr. Narin," Selene said, exhaling in relief. "We can trust her," she murmured to Ray. "The human may accompany the patient," Narin said crisply. "As my assistant?" "Under my supervision, of course." Thurin hesitated, clearly displeased, but finally stepped aside. "Very well. But any breach of station protocol is on your record, Doctor." "Understood," Narin replied, her eyes flashing with quiet defiance. The escort led them through the crystalline halls of Nexus. The architecture was almost painfully beautiful, arched corridors filled with soft bioluminescent light, walls that rippled faintly with flowing energy like liquid glass. It should have inspired awe, but Ray felt only unease. Every Aurelian they passed turned to stare, some curious, others cold, their telepathic presence brushing against him like whispers he couldn't quite hear. To them, he was an anomaly, a human walking in their sacred halls. When they reached the medical wing, Narin sealed the door and turned, her expression shifting from composed to urgent. "We don't have much time. Perrin's already moving to intercept you." Selene stiffened. "He wouldn't dare, not here." "He would," Narin said grimly, activating a holographic display. "Your mother's research threatens too much profit. The hegemony has been paying Krell scavengers for years to clean up loose ends. And now they've paid Perrin to finish the job." "Finish the job?" Ray said. "You mean an accident during the extraction procedure. Quick, efficient, deniable." Selene's composure cracked for the first time. "We need to move her." "Impossible," Narin replied. "The data integration has already begun. Moving her could kill her." "Then we protect her here," Ray said, scanning the room for entry points. The soldier in him was already mapping fields of fire, fallback positions, angles of approach. Narin stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Perrin's network runs deep. You'll have enemies inside the station and out. But you also have this." She held out a crystalline data shard. Inside, holographic strands shimmered like captured lightning. "What's that?" Ray asked. "Proof of the hegemony's genetic experiments. They've been weaponizing the Vorax, again enhancing them with hybrid tissue, violating every treaty on record. Annin's research is the only thing that can stop them." Selene took the shard, eyes dark with realization. "My mother's discovery. It isn't just about a cure. It's a key. A key that could collapse the entire hegemony war machine," Narin said. The room's lights flickered, then dimmed, an alarm pulse running through the station's systems. "They're coming," Narin hissed. "Perrin's men will be here in minutes." Selene grabbed Ray's arm. "We'll get the girls to my quarters. You and Narin hold the lab until I return." "No," Ray said firmly. "You'll need protection too." "They won't harm me," she replied, her confidence brittle but convincing. "Not yet. I still have diplomatic immunity." He hesitated, then nodded. Go, I'll cover the lab. The door sealed behind her as she vanished into the corridor. Nareen activated the security field around Anine's medical pod, its surface glowing faintly blue. You've fought before, she said, her tone oddly admiring. Long enough to know there's always another fight waiting, Ray replied, checking his weapon's charge. He moved to the viewport, watching the station's outer docking bays light up as more ships arrived. Krell signatures dozens. The hegemony wasn't waiting for subtlety anymore. Then the door chimed once, twice. Dr. Naring, came a cold voice from the hall. By order of the council, open this door. Naring met Ray's eyes. That's Perrin. Ray raised his rifle. Let him in. The door hissed open. Perrin entered with two hegemony officials in toe-tall, gray-skinned beings with elongated skulls and black, pitiless eyes. Attach Valerian's mother is now under council custody, Perrin announced smoothly. Step aside. She's dying, Naring said sharply. Your procedure will kill her. Unfortunate, Perrin said, smiling thinly. But progress demands sacrifice. You son of a, Ray began, but Perrin cut him off with a sneer. Human, he said, his tone dripping disdain. You've done enough damage meddling where you don't belong. Ray's finger tightened on the trigger. You have no idea how much more damage I can do. Then the station alarms exploded to life. A voice echoed over the comms. Security breach unauthorized vessels docking at Bay 12. Naren's console flared red. Krell ships, she breathed. They're inside. Perrin's smug expression faltered. One of the hegemony officials turned toward him. You promised containment. Ray's grin was feral. Looks like your friends decided to skip diplomacy. The first explosion rocked the walls, throwing them all off balance. The lights flickered, shadows dancing like ghosts across the sterile room. Ray steadied himself, eyes blazing. You wanted progress, counselor? He said, chambering around. Here it comes. The station trembled like a wounded beast, alarms howling as red emergency lights washed the corridor in crimson. Selene sprinted toward the medical wing, her daughters already safe inside her private quarters, with an automated security field sealed around them. Every step echoed with a low growl of distant detonations. The Krell ships had breached the outer hull, spilling mercenaries into Nexus, like an infection spreading through a bloodstream. She burst through the final bulkhead into chaos. Ray stood behind an overturned console, firing short, controlled bursts at a squad of advancing Krell, their chitinous armor gleaming under the strobing lights. The air smelled of ozone and scorched metal. Dr. Naring was crouched beside Anine's medical pod, frantically working the controls. Counselor Perrin cowered behind a desk, his composure stripped away, shouting contradictory orders into a dead communicator. About time, Ray shouted as Selene slid behind cover beside him. You bring the cavalry? Better, she said, gripping his arm as another explosion shook the deck. I brought authorization. She darted to the central console, her fingers flying across the interface. The station broadcast system, she explained over the rising noise. If I transmit my mother's data now, the entire sector will see the truth. Do it, Ray said. We'll buy you time. Two Krell leaped through the doorway, shrieking, plasma rifles spitting blue light. Ray rolled from cover and fired 3 rounds, the impacts bursting through their carapace in sprays of acid. He moved like instinct, and muscle memory had fused into one, the old soldier fully awake again. Perrin scrambled toward the exit, but one of the hegemony agents grabbed him by the collar, hissing in his ear. You promised discretion. Now the galaxy will burn. Let go of me. Perrin shouted, panic breaking through his arrogance. I can fix this. He lunged for the console, but Ray's rifle snapped up, the targeting reticle glowing over the counselor's chest. Touch that panel and I'll fix you, Ray said coldly. Behind him, Anine stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, luminous and clear, her voice suddenly strong. Celine. The sound froze everyone. Even the Krell hesitated. Celine turned, disbelief flashing across her face. Mother, you shouldn't. Finish it, Anine said. Use the override. The one I built into the Valerian line. Perrin's eyes widened. That protocol was abolished generations ago. Not in hardware, Anine whispered, her lips curving in a faint, knowing smile. Only in memory. She reached out weakly to Narin, who pressed a small vial of luminescent fluid into her hand. The data's extracted, Narin said. It's stable? Then it's time, Anine murmured. She looked at her daughter, love and pride mingling with exhaustion. You'll need to carry this forward. Selene hesitated, tears blurring her vision, but Ray's steady nod gave her strength. She turned back to the console and entered the code her mother whispered. Valerian Prime Override 7392. The number burned into Ray's mind like deja vu. The screens flared, symbols racing across them, faster than thought. The hegemony agents lunged forward shouting, but Ray moved first, slamming one aside with his rifle stock and shooting the other through the shoulder. The wounded alien screeched as acid hissed across the floor. Broadcast initiated. The console intoned in a calm synthetic voice. Transmission range, galactic. Data flowed outward in cascading waves of blue light, streaming through the station's comm array, out into the void. Anine's research, the proof of the hegemony's crimes, the genetic vulnerability of the Vorax, everything unleashed at once. You'll destroy us all. Perrin screamed, lunging for Celine. Ray intercepted him mid-stride, driving a fist into the counselor's jaw. You already did, Ray growled. The counselor crashed to the floor, clutching his face, the last traces of arrogance bleeding away. The Krell outside faltered mid-assault, their movements jerking erratically. The high-pitched wail of their neural implants filled the air before silence swallowed everything. One by one they collapsed, motionless. The vibrations underfoot ceased as their ships powered down. Celine stared at the monitor, astonished. The signal that's affecting them. The genetic broadcast, Narin breathed. The Vorax and Krell share compatible neural systems. Your mother's sequence is rewriting their aggression centers. Anine smiled faintly, her hand slipping into her daughter's. No more monsters, she whispered. Then her chest stilled. Celine caught her mother's hand and pressed it to her heart, her tears falling silently. Ray turned away, giving her that moment, his jaw clenched against the ache in his own chest. Outside, emergency klaxons shifted pitch as new transmissions poured in from across the sector. A dozen fleets, the Terran Alliance, Aurelian Defense, even fringe colonies had received the data. A war had been stopped before it could begin. Moments later, more figures arrived, station guards led by Chief Counselor Talon, his robes flowing like liquid silver. His gaze swept across the room, taking in the wreckage, the dead, the exhausted survivors. What have you done, attached Valerian? He asked, though his voice held awe more than anger. Celine rose slowly, standing beside Ray. We told the truth, she said simply. Talon's eyes softened. Then you've done what the Council could not. He turned to Perrin, who glared up from the floor. Take him, Talon ordered. Security officers seized the disgraced counselor and the hegemony envoys. As they were dragged away, Perrin spat venomously. You think they'll thank a human for this? He's polluted your purity. You're lying. Celine stepped forward, her voice cutting like a blade. He's saved it. When the chamber finally emptied, silence settled again, heavy but no longer hopeless. Ray leaned against the console, the adrenaline fading into bone-deep weariness. So, he said quietly. What happens now? Talen's eyes glimmered with something like respect. Now we rebuild. Together, the Council will establish a joint liaison between our species to oversee the peace. He looked directly at Ray, and I can think of no one better suited for it than the man who opened the door that started it all. Ray blinked, caught off guard. I'm no diplomat. Sometimes, Talen said, smiling faintly, the best diplomats are soldiers who remember what peace costs. Months later, the scars of battle had faded, replaced by the quiet hum of the station reborn. The human Aurelian Cultural Exchange Center stood at the heart of Nexus, its halls alive with laughter, light, and the mingled cadence of two worlds learning to coexist. Fina practiced her first speech before a crowd of delegates. Tira painted bright murals of stars and ships and open doors. Anine's name adorned a research wing. And on the observation deck, Ray stood beside Celine, watching the sunrise spill across the curve of the planet below. Do you ever miss the quiet? She asked softly. He thought of Taro's barren storms, the loneliness he'd once mistaken for peace. Not for a second, he said. She smiled, her fingers brushing his. My grandmother used to say, the universe puts us where we need to be, even when we don't understand why. Ray's gaze lingered on the stars. On Earth, he murmured. We just call that luck? Luck, Celine echoed, her smile deepening. Or something greater. She leaned against him, her bioluminescent skin glowing faintly in the dim light. Far below, fleets from a dozen species crossed paths without hostility for the first time in memory. He opened his door once and let 3 strangers in from a storm. By morning, he had changed the course of a galaxy.